Hello there, and welcome to the Brainwave Therapy channel. Tonight we drift into the quiet complexity of the ADHD brain at bedtime, a place where thoughts often race when the world slows down, where energy can surge when it seems like it should fade, and where sleep may feel like a distant shore that keeps moving further away the harder you swim toward it. If you have ADHD, you may know this feeling intimately. The exhaustion that weighs on your body while your mind spins like a carousel that forgot how to stop. The frustration of lying in darkness, watching minutes turn to hours, knowing you need to sleep yet feeling more awake than you did at noon. The strange paradox of being utterly tired and completely alert at the same time is a common experience in ADHD, even if it is not universal. Tonight, we explore why this happens. Not to fix you or change you, but to understand the beautiful, complicated, sometimes maddening way your brain works when it encounters that simple human need called sleep. We will wander through the chemistry of your thoughts, the rhythms that appear to pulse differently in many ADHD minds, and the quiet rebellions your brain stages against the very rest it desperately needs. As you settle in, let your body soften, even as your mind may race. Let the weight of the day begin to lift, knowing that understanding brings its own kind of peace. If you enjoy these gentle explorations, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share your own experiences below. Your presence helps others who lie awake at night feel less alone, one restless soul at a time. For now, breathe deeply. Let yourself be exactly where you are, and let us step quietly into the nighttime world of the ADHD brain. Let's begin. The ADHD brain at night. When most brains prepare for sleep, they begin a gradual descent into quietness. Thoughts slow, activity dims. The whole system shifts toward rest like a city turning off its lights one building at a time. But many people with ADHD notice that their brains do something unexpected at bedtime. They seem to wake up. This is not rebellion or stubbornness. This is chemistry and neurobiology. The ADHD brain typically operates with altered regulation of certain neurotransmitters, particularly dopamine and norepinephrine, which help control attention, motivation, and arousal. In ADHD, these systems function differently, creating patterns that do not always align with what the rest of the world considers normal. During the day, when the world demands focus and the ADHD brain struggles to find it, the lack of engaging stimulation can feel overwhelming. Tasks that should be simple become mountains. Attention drifts like smoke. But at night, when demands fade and the world grows quiet, something often shifts. The absence of external pressure can, in many cases, allow the ADHD brain to finally feel free. Without the weight of expectations, without the constant redirecting of attention, the mind begins to wander into its natural state. For many with ADHD, this natural state is one of expansive thinking, rapid connections, and intense mental activity. The brain that struggled all day to focus on a single task suddenly wants to think about everything at once. Dopamine plays a central role in this nighttime awakening. This neurotransmitter helps regulate the reward system and motivation. In ADHD, dopamine signaling is often less efficient, which is one reason people with ADHD tend to seek activities that provide quick dopamine hits. At night, when structure disappears, the brain may seek stimulation through thoughts, plans, creative ideas, or worries, because these generate the sense of engagement and reward it craves. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function and self-regulation, also behaves differently in ADHD. Throughout the day, this part of the brain works hard, trying to manage attention, impulses, and planning. By nighttime, it may be functionally tired, which could help explain what some people describe as the ADHD witching hour, when impulse control feels weaker and the mind runs wild. This phrase is informal, but it captures a pattern many report anecdotally. There is also the matter of the default mode network, a collection of brain regions that activate when the mind is at rest and not focused on the outside world. In typical brains, this network engages during daydreaming or mind wandering, but quiets during focused tasks or as sleep approaches. In ADHD, research suggests that this network can show atypical activity and connectivity, and it may not quiet as efficiently when it should. When you lie down to sleep, your default mode network might surge into action, generating thoughts about past conversations, future scenarios, creative projects, or random questions like why whales do not get decompression sickness. This kind of example is illustrative rather than literal, but it reflects the kind of associative thinking many people describe. These thoughts arrive not as gentle musings, but as urgent demands for attention. Each thought branches into 3 more. Each question spawns a dozen related inquiries. Your body may feel tired, your eyes may be heavy, but your brain can interpret the stillness of bedtime as an invitation to finally process everything it could not during the day. It treats the quiet darkness as a canvas for all the thoughts it had to suppress while navigating the structured world. The ADHD brain at night often feels like a computer with too many browser tabs open. Each tab plays a different video, loads a different article, runs a different process. You cannot find the tab that is making noise. You cannot close them all at once. They just keep running, demanding processing power, preventing the system from shutting down properly. Some people with ADHD describe their nighttime thoughts as a television stuck on scan mode, flipping rapidly through channels without stopping long enough to watch any single program. Others describe it as a radio playing multiple stations simultaneously, each one clear enough to hear, but none clear enough to follow completely. These metaphors are not literal brain models, but they line up with common lived experience reports. The frustration compounds when you recognize that you are tired. You want to sleep. You need to sleep. Yet wanting and needing do not translate into the ability to make it happen. The ADHD brain does not always respond to willpower or logic when it comes to sleep. It responds to neurochemistry and arousal patterns, and those follow their own rhythms. At night, the brain that spent all day being told to focus, to sit still, to pay attention, finally releases itself from those demands. And in that release, it may discover energy it could not access during daylight hours. This is why so many people with ADHD report feeling their most creative, most alive, or most capable in the late evening or deep night. Their brains are finally operating on a timetable that feels more natural to them, even if research is still teasing apart the mechanisms behind this. Understanding this pattern does not immediately fix it, but it removes the layer of shame that often accompanies sleepless nights. You are not broken. You are not failing at something simple. Your brain is following patterns that, for many with ADHD, are genuinely different from the 9-to-5 world's expectations. At night, your brain reminds you of this truth whether you want the reminder or not. The circadian rhythm disconnect. Every human body contains an internal clock that regulates sleep and wakefulness. This circadian rhythm responds to light, temperature, and time cues, orchestrating the release of hormones that make you feel alert in the morning and sleepy at night. But for many people with ADHD, this internal clock appears to run on a later schedule than the surrounding world. Research consistently shows that people with ADHD are more likely to have delayed sleep phase or delayed sleep onset, meaning their natural sleep-wake cycle is shifted later. Where most people feel sleepy between 10 and 11 at night, someone with ADHD might not feel genuinely ready for sleep until 1, 2, or even 3 in the morning. This is not a simple choice or a mere bad habit. It is strongly influenced by biology, including how the ADHD brain produces and responds to melatonin, the hormone that signals sleep time. Several studies have found that people with ADHD often show melatonin onset about 1 to 1.5 hours later than people without ADHD. Their bodies simply do not receive the chemical wind-down signal at the same time as others. The delay creates a profound mismatch between what society expects and what the body wants. Schools start early. Jobs begin at 8 or 9. The world operates on a schedule built around people whose brains release melatonin in the late evening. But if your brain does not shift into a sleep-ready state until midnight or later, you are perpetually trying to sleep before your body is ready. Imagine trying to eat a full meal when you are not hungry, or trying to fall asleep at 3 in the afternoon. No matter how much you want to do it, your body resists because the timing is wrong. This is what many people with ADHD experience every single night. They lie in bed during hours when their body is still signaling wakefulness, fighting biology with a kind of willpower that cannot fully override physiology. The delayed rhythm also affects morning wakefulness. If you fall asleep at 2 a.m. but need to wake at 7, you are cutting into the natural sleep window your body is trying to use. You wake during a phase when your body is still geared toward sleep. This creates the grogginess, difficulty waking, and morning fog that many people with ADHD describe. Over time, this pattern can accumulate into chronic sleep deprivation. Many people with ADHD average shorter sleep duration, wake more often, and take longer to fall asleep than those without ADHD. The sleep you do get might not include enough deep sleep or REM sleep if you are repeatedly cutting nights short. Some people with ADHD describe feeling like they live in a different internal time zone from everyone else. They feel chronically jet-lagged by their own life, trying to sync with a schedule that does not match their internal experience of time. This is not laziness or irresponsibility. This is a circadian system that appears shifted and often harder to entrain. The night owl tendency in ADHD has been discussed in evolutionary terms. Some researchers have speculated that having naturally late alert individuals in ancestral groups could have helped with nighttime vigilance and protection. This idea is intriguing and could imply that traits linked to ADHD once offered group advantages, but it remains a hypothesis rather than a proven explanation. In the modern world, however, this possible adaptation becomes a challenge. Society is not broadly structured to accommodate different chronotypes. There is limited flexibility for people whose brains come alive at midnight and struggle at dawn. Instead, there is judgment, misunderstanding, and the constant pressure to conform to a rhythm that may feel fundamentally wrong. Light exposure complicates the circadian disconnect further. Some studies suggest that individuals with ADHD can show altered sensitivity to light cues that help regulate circadian rhythms. Morning sunlight, which should signal wakefulness and help reset the internal clock, might not have as strong an impact. Evening darkness, which should trigger sleepiness, might not generate the expected response. Meanwhile, artificial light from screens, which emits blue wavelengths that suppress melatonin production, has a particularly strong potential to delay sleep in people already prone to late melatonin onset. The dopamine-seeking ADHD brain is drawn to screens for stimulation precisely during the hours when that stimulation pushes sleep even further away. The relationship between ADHD and circadian rhythms creates a feedback loop. Irregular sleep patterns can worsen ADHD symptoms like attention and emotional regulation, and more severe symptoms make it harder to maintain consistent sleep routines. The cycle reinforces itself night after night. Some people with ADHD find that their sleep schedule naturally drifts later and later when left unstructured. Given full freedom, they might gradually rotate their sleep times forward, a pattern sometimes labeled non-24-hour sleep-wake disorder. This specific diagnosis is more established in totally blind individuals, but there is growing discussion of circadian instability in subsets of people with ADHD. This area is still being studied. The circadian rhythm disconnect helps explain why forcing yourself to lie in bed at a reasonable hour often feels torturous. You are asking your body to initiate a process it is not yet prepared for. You are working against the architecture of your sleep system, not just against habits. Understanding this disconnect offers some relief. It explains the lifelong struggle with bedtime. It validates the feeling that you are swimming against a current no one else seems to notice. And it suggests that the most effective solutions will try to work with your natural rhythms, sometimes shifting them gradually, sometimes accommodating them, rather than simply forcing you into a mold. The paradox of stimulation. One of the most confusing aspects of ADHD and sleep is the paradox of stimulation. When your brain is understimulated, it seeks activity, novelty, and engagement to generate the dopamine it needs. At bedtime, when you should be winding down, the ADHD brain often interprets the lack of stimulation as a problem to solve rather than a natural state to embrace. The dopamine system in ADHD functions less efficiently than in typical brains. Dopamine receptors may be less sensitive, or there may be differences in how dopamine is produced, released, or recycled. This creates a chronic tendency to seek activities that provide dopamine hits. During the day, this can show up as impulsivity, difficulty with boring tasks, and attraction to high stimulation activities. At night, the same drive continues. Your body knows it needs sleep. Your rational mind understands that you should turn off the lights and close your eyes. But your brain, still hungry for stimulation, pulls you toward anything that might satisfy that craving. One more video, one more scroll through social media, one more article, one more level of the game. These activities feel necessary in the moment. They provide the stimulation your brain is demanding, but they also activate your mind in ways that push sleep further away. Screens emit blue light that suppresses melatonin, especially in the evening. Engaging content triggers emotional and cognitive responses that increase arousal. The dopamine bursts from interesting information or social interaction wake your brain up instead of letting it settle. The paradox deepens when you consider that many people with ADHD experience hyperfocus on activities they find engaging. Hyperfocus is a state of intense concentration that can last for hours, during which the person becomes so absorbed that they lose track of time, hunger, and even the need to sleep. This is well described in clinical and lived experience literature, even though it is not an official diagnostic criterion. When hyperfocus occurs at night, it can keep you awake for hours past your intended bedtime. You might start reading an article and find yourself, 4 hours later, having explored dozens of related topics. You might begin a creative project and work on it until dawn. You might get caught in a conversation or game and suddenly realize the sun is coming up. The transition out of hyperfocus is difficult for the ADHD brain. You cannot simply stop intense focus and immediately sleep. Your brain needs time to downshift from that heightened state. But by the time you finish the activity, it might be 3 or 4 in the morning. Now you face the choice of sleeping for a few hours or pushing through the day on little or no sleep. Many people with ADHD develop what has come to be called revenge bedtime procrastination. After a day of forced structure, demands, and attempts to control their attention, they feel entitled to time that belongs only to them. Night offers that freedom. No one expects anything, no tasks loom, no one interrupts. This concept has been discussed in broader sleep research and seems especially resonant for neurodivergent folks. The revenge aspect comes from reclaiming hours that feel stolen during the day. If you spent 8 hours forcing your brain to do things it found boring, exhausting yourself trying to meet neurotypical expectations, then staying up late can feel like taking back what belongs to you. This could imply that some late-night wakefulness is as much about autonomy and identity as it is about stimulation. This is not logical in the strict sense. It sacrifices tomorrow for tonight. It deepens sleep deprivation and makes the next day harder. But in the moment, it feels necessary. It feels like the only time you truly get to be yourself without judgment or pressure. The ADHD brain often values that immediate sense of freedom more than the abstract future benefit of being well-rested. Stimulation seeking at night also shows up as difficulty engaging in boring pre-sleep routines. Brushing teeth, washing your face, changing into pajamas. These tasks require executive function but provide no dopamine reward. For the ADHD brain, they can feel disproportionately difficult. You know you should do them. You might want to. But the gap between knowing and doing stretches wide. So you delay. You tell yourself you will get ready for bed in 5 minutes. But 5 minutes becomes 30, becomes an hour. The later it gets, the more urgent sleep becomes. But the harder it is to mobilize yourself to do the uninteresting tasks that facilitate it. The pressure increases, and so does the paralysis. Some people with ADHD describe a pattern where they feel wired and awake until the moment they finally complete their bedtime routine. Then, as soon as they lie down, their brain suddenly shifts into worry mode or planning mode or creative mode. The act of lying down, of removing all stimulation, creates a void that the brain rushes to fill. This pattern is not universal, but it aligns with many anecdotal reports. The stimulation paradox helps explain why many people with ADHD sleep better with some form of gentle background input. White noise, rain sounds, a fan, or even a television on low volume can provide just enough stimulation to keep the brain from spinning into its own intense content. The brain gets something light to engage with, which may prevent silence from becoming overwhelming. Without understanding this paradox, you might judge yourself harshly for your nighttime habits. You might call yourself undisciplined or lazy for staying up late doing things that are not important. But with understanding, it becomes clearer that your brain is following its pattern of seeking stimulation and regulation, even when that conflicts with your intentions. Racing thoughts and mental hyperactivity. For many people with ADHD, bedtime becomes the moment when thoughts unspool in every direction. The quiet of the night removes distractions, and in that stillness, the brain fills the silence with movement. Thoughts race, not because you choose them, but because the system that governs attention simply does not shut off. This mental hyperactivity is not just overthinking. It is the mind moving rapidly across ideas, memories, fears, plans, and creative sparks. You might replay a conversation from earlier, constructing alternate versions of what you could have said. You might suddenly remember tasks you forgot. You might feel compelled to research a topic that popped into your mind out of nowhere. In ADHD, this type of thinking is influenced by how the brain shifts between networks responsible for focus and rest. The default mode network becomes active when the mind is wandering, and in ADHD, it is thought to be more easily and intensely activated. This could imply that when the external world grows quiet, the internal world becomes louder. The thoughts themselves are not always distressing. Sometimes they are creative, exciting, or intriguing. Many people with ADHD find that their best ideas come at night, when the brain is unburdened by demands. But even positive racing thoughts can keep you awake. Excitement feels similar to anxiety in the body. Both activate the nervous system and make sleep more elusive. For others, nighttime thoughts tilt toward worry. You might feel a sudden fear that you forgot something important. You might think about past mistakes or future challenges. These thoughts can spiral quickly, becoming larger and more urgent. This does not mean your concerns are unrealistic, only that the nighttime version of your brain amplifies them. When thoughts grow too loud, silence can feel hostile. It becomes a magnifying glass for whatever your brain is focused on. In the absence of external stimulation, internal stimulation takes center stage. This is why many people with ADHD prefer falling asleep with sound. White noise, rain sounds, or even low-volume TV can provide just enough external signal to keep internal noise from overwhelming you. Racing thoughts can also feel physical. Some people describe a buzzing sensation, a sense of internal restlessness, or the feeling of being mentally revved up. These descriptions are subjective, but they align with common reports from those who experience nighttime hyperarousal. This is not something you can simply turn off with willpower. Your brain is not misbehaving. It is doing what it naturally does when left unstimulated. Understanding that helps reduce the shame around it, even if it does not immediately make sleep easier. Time, blindness, and sleep. Time blindness is one of the most misunderstood aspects of ADHD. It is not about irresponsibility or carelessness. It is about how the brain perceives the passage of time. For many people with ADHD, time does not flow steadily. Instead, it collapses into two categories: now and not now. At night, this becomes especially challenging. You might look at the clock and see that it is 10 p.m. You feel like you have plenty of time. Then you start doing something small, checking a message, opening a video, reading an article. And when you glance back at the clock, an hour or two has passed. This does not mean you are unaware of time entirely. It means your brain was not receiving the internal cues that usually help people measure passing minutes. Without those cues, time can slip by almost invisibly. Time blindness also shows up in the difficulty many people have with starting their bedtime routine. You might know you need to start winding down at a certain time. You might feel the desire to sleep, but the actual process of initiating the routine does not happen. This is not procrastination in the typical sense. It is a disconnect between intention and action. For some, time blindness and delayed sleep rhythms can blend into a pattern that resembles shifting sleep phases. The body wants sleep later and later. The mind does not feel the passage of hours the way others do. Over time, this can create cycles where sleep moves increasingly out of sync with the outside world. This does not mean you cannot change your sleep habits. It simply means the tools that work for neurotypical individuals may not work the same way for you. You may need external structures, alarms, routines, sensory cues, to navigate something your internal system does not handle easily. Understanding time blindness softens the self-criticism that often comes with late nights. It reframes the struggle not as a personal flaw, but as a neurological pattern that needs support rather than shame. Restlessness and physical symptoms. The ADHD experience is not confined to the mind. The body participates as well. Restlessness, fidgeting, and a need for movement often persist into the evening. When you lie down to sleep, your body may not be ready to be still. Instead of relaxing, you might feel the urge to stretch, shift positions repeatedly, or get out of bed entirely. This physical restlessness can be driven by several factors. The nervous system may still be in a state of heightened arousal from the day. The body may not have fully discharged accumulated energy. Movement helps regulate attention and emotion for many people with ADHD, so lying still removes a coping mechanism the brain often relies on. Some individuals also report discomfort or sensory itchiness when trying to sleep. Textures feel wrong, clothes feel restrictive, or the bed feels too warm or too cold. These sensory sensitivities are commonly associated with ADHD and other neurodivergent experiences. They can turn bedtime into a sensory challenge as much as an emotional one. Restless legs syndrome is more frequently reported among people with ADHD, though the relationship is still being studied. For those who experience it, the sensation of needing to move the legs can be strong enough to keep them awake long after they want to sleep. Temperature regulation plays a role as well. A slightly cooler environment helps signal sleep, but some people with ADHD struggle to find the temperature that feels right. The search for comfort becomes another obstacle to rest. This combination of physical restlessness and sensory sensitivity means that falling asleep requires not just mental calm, but bodily calm. And for many people with ADHD, both systems resist shutting down easily. Anxiety, worry, and sleep. Anxiety often intertwines with ADHD, whether as a coexisting condition or as a result of chronic stress from managing symptoms in a world not designed for neurodivergent minds. A significant number of adults with ADHD experience some form of anxiety, which can intensify at night. Bedtime removes distractions and external demands. Suddenly, the worries that were pushed aside during the day have space to grow. You might worry about the future, replay conversations, or mentally rehearse scenarios. The mind becomes both storyteller and audience, and the stories often take a stressful turn. Rejection sensitivity also plays a role for many. Even small social interactions can weigh heavily at night. You might analyze your tone in a text message or worry that someone misinterpreted your words. These thoughts can feel urgent, even if they seem small in the light of day. This nighttime anxiety is not a sign of weakness. It is a result of how the ADHD brain processes emotions and stress. Emotional regulation works differently, and the boundary between thought and feeling can blur. A small worry becomes a physical sensation. A hypothetical scenario can trigger real tension. Understanding this connection helps soften the fear around anxiety itself. When you know why your brain behaves this way, you gain the power to respond with compassion rather than self-judgment. Medication effects and timing. Medication can play an important role in ADHD, but its effects on sleep can vary widely. Stimulants do not increase dopamine production. Instead, they increase dopamine availability and help regulate attention and impulse control. For some people, This improves sleep because the mind is quieter at night after a more regulated day. For others, the medication may cause difficulty falling asleep if taken too late. Some individuals report that a small dose of stimulant medication in the evening helps them wind down by reducing mental chaos and anxiety. This is not a universal experience and depends on the individual's response. It is important to follow professional guidance regarding timing, as taking stimulants too late can also increase wakefulness. Rebound effects can occur when stimulant medication wears off. This may lead to irritability, restlessness, or emotional intensity in the evening, all of which can make sleep more challenging. Melatonin supplements are often used to help regulate delayed sleep-wake cycles. Lower doses, around 0.5 to 1 milligram, are sometimes more effective for shifting circadian rhythms than higher doses. Taking melatonin too early or too late, however, can reduce its effectiveness. Timing matters greatly, and trial and error under guidance is often necessary. Medication is not a guarantee of better sleep, but understanding how your body responds helps you make more informed choices. Environmental and routine challenges. Sleep hygiene advice often assumes a level of executive function that many people with ADHD struggle to maintain. Routines require planning, consistency, and follow-through, skills that are affected by ADHD symptoms. A dark room, a cool temperature, and a consistent bedtime are helpful, but they are not always enough. The challenge lies in performing the tasks that create these conditions. Turning off lights, finishing chores, putting away devices, all of these steps require activation energy that may feel disproportionately difficult. Clutter and unfinished tasks can also create mental noise. The brain may feel unable to rest when surrounded by reminders of things left undone. This is not a sign of disorganization as a moral failure, but rather a reflection of how ADHD impacts task initiation and completion. Understanding that sleep hygiene is not a magic cure, but a supportive framework helps remove unrealistic expectations. Sleep for ADHD often requires a combination of environmental adjustments, psychological understanding, and tailored routines. Strategies and understanding. Effective sleep strategies for ADHD are those that work with your brain rather than against it. Routine can help, but it needs to be flexible. Light exposure, especially in the morning, can shift your circadian rhythm gradually, though consistency is key. Gentle background noise can support relaxation by giving the mind a stable anchor. Limiting screens before bed helps because of the impact of blue light on melatonin, but this is often easier said than done. Using warmer screen tones, reducing brightness, or switching to less stimulating activities can serve as intermediate steps. Exercise earlier in the day can assist with nighttime restlessness. Mindfulness or grounding techniques may help quiet racing thoughts, though these practices often require patience and repetition. Sleep restriction therapy should only be done under expert guidance, as it involves limiting time in bed to consolidate sleep and can be challenging. Some people benefit from setting alarms that signal the beginning of a bedtime routine, helping offset time blindness. Others find that preparing for bed earlier in the evening prevents the sudden overwhelm that occurs when exhaustion and tasks collide. Ultimately, the goal is not perfection, but understanding. Sleep difficulty in ADHD is complex, multifaceted, and influenced by biology, environment, and lived experience. Compassion for yourself is part of the solution. Closing. If you made it this far, thank you for staying with me. Sleep is not always easy, especially when your brain carries its own rhythms, patterns, and challenges. You deserve rest, not just physically, but emotionally. Whether tonight brings deep sleep or a wandering mind, know that understanding your brain is a step toward treating yourself with kindness. Thank you for spending this time with me. Be gentle with yourself. Good night.